Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Neil Osborne. Neil's worked exclusively in the salon, clinic and aesthetic markets for over 3 decades as a sales and business coach. He helps businesses grow their sales, develop their skills. That's something we can all do with. So can we please welcome Neil Osborne to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just on my way up, can I ask you a question? Just need to ask you a question if I could, please. Give me a yes if you were here yesterday. Yes. Yeah, nice and loud, sorry. Yes. Lovely, thank you. Give me a yes if you were in the aesthetic industry in some capacity. Yes. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, and give me a yes if you plan to be here for most of today. Yes. Okay, great, thank you. I needed that. And you'll discover why a little bit later. That's okay. Persuasion is the new black. It's a consultation tool. It's that simple. So how can we use it? Many people have written about persuasion, Richard Perloff being one of them, an academic and a well-respected author. He describes it as a symbolic process to convince others in an atmosphere of choice and self-persuasion. How can we help our clients reach self-persuasion? If we go back even further and look at Aristotle and his words, he would say to you, for example, that persuasion cannot occur in the absence of emotion. And also people are moved by how it makes them feel. Wow. I'd like to come back and share with you some tips how you can access those emotions with your clients. However, before I do, I'd like to pose a question. And my question to you is that why is it that some businesses go on to be incredibly successful in our industry and others not? Why is that? We see it a lot, don't we? What I'd like to suggest to you is that there are a couple of reasons, and amongst many, I'd like to isolate one in particular and chat about that with you today. And I personally have discovered that it's industry skill that can be totally connected and or can influence the success that people can achieve in our industry. And for me, there are 3 levels of skill. The first level of skill is your qualifications, and especially from our audience prior and your years of experience. But it's the qualifications which is our base skill. Now, what we all know is our qualifications alone can only generate a small amount of income, because the piece that needs to be added to that is actually experience. And when we add experience to qualifications, our ability to generate an income actually becomes, well, in some cases quite sustainable, but definitely not accelerated, because we need to add the third skill to that. And that third skill is the piece that truly accelerates one's achievements in our industry. And that skill is what we call communication. Because it's not what you know, it's how well you can articulate it with an audience, isn't it? It's how well you can articulate it to a patient. It's how well you can articulate it to your team. It's how well you can articulate it to others that today gives you the ability to be truly persuasive. By way of an example, I chose a client that we've been working with to share with you today, and her name is Susie. Susie recently joined a fairly fast-moving clinic that we'd been working with, and Susie was chosen for her experience and her qualifications. Highly qualified and very, very experienced within her sphere of work. However, within the first couple of months, she was struggling to make an impression in this clinic and was averaging somewhat only like 38 clients a month. It's a very low number. Had a very low ACT or ACT being the average client transaction. And more importantly, she wasn't getting the accumulative effect of retail and was only generating 2% of her income in retail. We introduced her to a communication style, and this is the impact it had on her dollars. Huge, huge impact. But within 3 months, things had changed for Susie. And this is where Susie concluded at the end of the 3 months. She started off with only doing 38 clients a month. She was at 107. She had a fantastic retention rate of 94%. Wow, good number, yeah? And her retail had grown dramatically to 21%, because what we know, to be persuasive in our industry, we need to focus on 5 key activities in our clinics. 1 is the upsell, 2 is the cross-sell, 3 is rebooking, selling programs, 4 is retention, and when we do those well, number 5, which is retail, looks after itself. It is those 5 skills, and what we focused on with Susie was that this clinic had actually introduced a new device at this time. And what we focused on was helping her establish what we call the cross-sell, which is the most difficult of all, to go from one treatment category to another, yeah? To upsell while you're in one treatment category is quite easy, and to use the old traditional, hair removal as the example, to go from a Brazilian underarms to a chin is really easy, yeah? But to go from a hair removal treatment to a skin consultation or an injectables consultation, which is what we classify as a cross-sell, can be very challenging. And there are certain skills that we need to focus on to do that. Very exciting result. And Susie today is gone on. If you do some numbers, I didn't put her a new act up there or her new average client transaction, because I don't particularly want to divulge clients' turnover, but she had a 3-fold increase in her average client transaction. So for those of you who are good with numbers, you can do some very quick numbers from what I've now given you and work out she actually had a massive, massive increase in her turnover. So how do we do that? Well, very simply, we need to focus on the ability to communicate with people and discover what's different between what they want, what they walk in telling you they want, and what they really need to achieve that want. How do you negotiate that space? Some people I work with really struggle and find it very difficult to actually take a client from one to the other. So how do you actually achieve this? How do you move into this space? Well, firstly, we need to look at ways that we can become irreplaceable to our patients. And we were talking about it earlier with the ability to listen. What I observe, especially when we work in volume businesses, is that people don't listen to understand. They actually listen to interrupt. Yes? Don't we? Well, let's wait for that. Oh, I can get my point in there and land a punch, or, oh, that's perfect treatment, I know that, bang. Does the client feel heard when we do that? I'd have to suggest you're not. See, my belief is that you need to actively listen. And you need to listen to a level of where you're asking really good questions. We call them power questions. Power questions are not manipulative questions, not at all. They are a portfolio of questions that we build with each clinic that helps them open up clients, to really get to understand what's behind their desire, what's behind their need, what's behind their wish. And for me, that is the key to having a really successful business in our industry. 3 quick tips to help you with some behavioural adjustments so that you can become more persuasive. And by the way, persuasive simply means the ability to articulate, the ability to share your point of view in a way that is generally accepted by your patient, your clientele, and/or your team. Because we need to be persuasive with our team sometimes as well, don't we? To get them on the right page. Well, the key thing I wish to share with you is this: telling ain't selling. Yeah? Sometimes we overdo it, we tell too much. Okay? And we even sometimes get to the point where we're talking too much, we can't stop ourselves talking. Yeah? Who's been there? Come on, hello. Yeah. We all get there at some point, don't we? And what we notice is the client's eyes glaze over as a result of that. We lose connection. When we lose connection, we lose trust. And we need to have trust in place for a client to purchase from us, regardless of whatever that recommendation may be. So I need to ask you to move away from a telling style and move, which is a selling style, by the way, and I need to ask you to be open to moving to a persuasive style, which is an asking style. So simple, the difference between the two. Old-fashioned selling is all about telling, manipulative. Don't shut up. Client goes, oh, I've been in a really bad sales experience before. I know what this is like. I'm going to just close down on this person. Versus, have you ever been with a solicitor or someone of that nature, highly skilled, highly qualified, and you have this meeting, and then you walk out and you go, wow, that guy was amazing, or that lady was amazing. They just asked some incredible questions. They really got me. You notice he didn't tell you anything? All he did was ask questions. Wow. How could we do that? How could we influence someone to a point where they trust us and accept us because we've demonstrated our knowledge through not what we say, but what we ask? That is the way to demonstrate your skill in today's environment, is your questions, your power questions, and your questions that are relevant to you and your business. Second adjustment is I would like to ask you, next time a client asks you a question, before you answer it, to understand their perspective. Now, let me give you a really simple example that we can all relate to. Let's talk about retail. Client's talking to you and she says, oh, by the way, what size do those products come in? And you go, typical, ask question, deliver information. Oh, we have small, we have normal retail sizes, and some of them come in big. Has that really progressed the client to buying? Not at all. You don't know where to go. You know, when conversation goes really quiet, yeah? You know how you feel uncomfortable, so you fill it with talk? Yeah? So you start talking. So we're moving away from the sale now. But instead, the client now comes to me and says to me, so Neil, what size do those products come in? And I'd say, Jenny, can you tell me a little bit more about that? What is it you're looking for? And Jenny would say, actually, I've started travelling again. I want to fill my travel pack. Oh, okay, well, tell me, what is it you're missing? Is it a moisturiser? Is it a cleanser? Do you want some sheet mask? Do you want some samples? You with me? So now have I answered this question differently? And I've now progressed the client and made it easy for them to purchase. Conversely, she says, Neil, what size do these products come in? I say, oh, Jenny, can you tell me a little bit more about that? She says, well, actually, I want to get my daughter onto a really good quality product, and this is a cleanser, and I was wondering if you have any larger sizes. Well, actually, cleansers come in a 450ml size, Jenny, and I've actually got a toner and a moisturiser in that size as well, so you can share that with you. Would you like me to grab those 3 for you? Have I also now made it easier for Jenny to buy? Where the first one was I was just spraying information, and we call that spray and pray. You know, we spray a lot of information, then we pray and hope. Okay, that the client goes, oh, that's okay, don't tell me anymore. Here's my wallet, I'll take all of that. It just doesn't happen, does it? So we need to think about the way we engage. We need to think about our language. We need to think about the power of the question. Wow, it's so huge and yet so underutilised. How is your bedside manner? How would clients describe your bedside manner? I remember going to my first family doctor. He had a shocking, rude, abrupt, arrogant bedside manner, but Mum said he was the best doctor. Every injection I ever had hurt like hell, but Mum always said he was the best doctor. Yeah? Drove a flashy car. Mum said he was always the best doctor. You with me? What's your bedside manner? See, today people want connection. They want trust. They want the ability to communicate with you, yeah? If you can build trust with a client, they will purchase from you. The easiest way to build trust from a client is to listen to a client. So you trust people who listen to you. You like people who listen to you. So what's the step prior to that? You need to learn to ask really good questions so that they talk to you, so therefore you can listen to them. And that's the skill. And that is the skill that I wish to talk to you about today. However, I might also add that in communication, there is a lot of patterns. And in particular, my fave is always a pattern of 3. My wife's a writer. She always tells me I must express things in patterns of 3s. So let me share with you my pattern of 3. And we were talking earlier about the consultation with a client and how much they tell you and the ability to ask good questions. And you were red flagging, Mary, about whether they were a good or bad answer. I'll suggest to you that there's 3 layers in the way that people talk to you. The first layer is, or answer you, I should say. The first layer is public. And it will be, oh yes, look, I've got a bit of this, I've been to a few people, they tell me you're fantastic, I'd really like to. And it's really sort of almost the sort of thing that they would be prepared to say on large to many people, but there's no real connection to it. It's a fob off. You know how you get those ones? It's that first layer of answer. or I think I'll leave it today. First layer of objection. We call that the public layer, public objections. By the way, it needs to be ignored. Don't answer it, just acknowledge it, and then learn to ask a question to move to the second layer. The second layer is what we call personal. All of a sudden, it's now about me, and you'll notice that their language will change, and they will say things like, well, I really, feel about this, and when we actually get to the the personal layer, you actually have the ability to create influence. Because by the way, at the public layer, you can't really influence it because it's just one of those really broad comments that almost a fob off, So you need to be able to work around it. But finally, and by the way, when it's at a personal level, they're the sort of comments they'd say to their family, friends, maybe a trusted advisor. But when they get to their private level, this is the gold. This is self-talk. This is what they say to themselves. And if you can bring a client out to that level, you create emotion. They get very emotional about how they feel, the impact it has or the influence it has on them. And if you can take a client to that level, you create self-persuasion. They will persuade themselves to accept because you've allowed them to share their vulnerability. And you've become a trusted advisor in doing so. Versus, oh, I need eyes. Oh, that's okay, we've got some Botox, we can do that. Or even if it's some filler, that's not a problem. I'm exaggerating, I know you would never say it that way. But that's quite often, for some of you, how your minds work. Especially if it's after the third cup of coffee. Yeah? So we need to be mindful of clients' expectations. And clients' expectations today, post-COVID, is all about listening. So let me share with you how, or more importantly, a very simple thing you can do from day one, be it tomorrow, Monday, when you go back to the clinic. Research has shown that if we can shift a client's frame, NLP term for mood or mindset, we can create influence positively in a nurturing and trusting way. And here's my quiz. The client walks into your clinic, she's greeted by the receptionist, asked to fill out a form, and then she sits patiently in reception waiting for you to come out and greet her. And then you will be taking her from there to the consultation room, yeah? Your job is you've got to get 3 yeses between greetings and taking her to the consultation room. You've got to get 3 yeses. If you can get 3 yeses, documented research has proven that you have a 52% increase in the opportunity of the client accepting your recommendation. Wow, fact. I've monitored this, I've done this in lots of large clinics we work with, and it's amazing the impact it creates. So my question to you is, what are those 3 questions? What would you ask? Not a rhetorical question, you can participate.
Are you so-and-so?
Are you so-and-so? Yep. Yes? That's a really good one, because that's my first one too. And I'd go, hi, Jenny, is it? She goes, yep. I go, great, Jenny, how are you? Even if it's an existing client, I'd go, oh, Jenny, isn't it? I'd change my tone slightly to acknowledge awareness or acceptance of who it was. Thank you. Second question would be, I already know that from the records. Third question. Would you like to come through? Okay, so yes, really good one. Second question would be, are you here for your 10 o'clock? Or you're here for your 10 o'clock, aren't you? Again, depending on tone and reference of connection or relationship. So it simply goes like this. Hi, Jenny, is it? Yep. You're here for your 10 o'clock, aren't you? Yeah. Would you like to come through? Yep. Just in that simple split-second mode, I have changed the client's mood. See, we don't know. The client could have actually walked into the clinic having a fight with their son on the text argument, the latest thing we do. We text argument with our kids. Or she might have had a battle in the car park. She might have actually gone to the dress shop next door because she was 5 minutes early and had a really bad sales experience. You know that one? Oh, that makes you look great. It's all right. It took me a while to work out that saying to my wife, that makes your bum look good, is a good thing. It took me quite a while to work out why that question always gets asked. But anyway, my point to you is this. Understand that today's communication has changed. The world around communication has changed. We now call it Persuasion. Persuasion is in the English language, is what's called a portmanteau, and it's a blending of the word spending with the art of persuasion. And it's definitely a new way to help your clients spend more. And in that, I put to you that Persuasion is the new black. Thank you.